This podcast was brought to you by AIMA, the Australasian Integrative Medicine Association, and James Maskell, the creator of functionalforum.com. This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. Joining us all the way from the USA is James Maskell. He's a creator of Functional Forum, the world's largest integrative medicine conference. He lectures internationally and has been featured on TEDmed, HuffPost Live, TEDx and more, and is a contributor to many major news outlets. His organisation and book of the same name, The Evolution of Medicine, prepares doctors for the next era of predictive, preventive, personalised and participatory medicine. Now, I've got to mention that James will be speaking in Australia for AIMA, or in conjunction with AIMA, a subject called The Future of Medicine, with James Maskell and the Functional Micropractice. That'll be at the Redfern Town Hall on March the 25th in Sydney 2017. You can look this up on the website thefutures.eventbrite.com.au. He'll also be speaking at a tech conference in Brisbane later called Myriad Live, Reducing Healthcare Costs is the Next $1 Trillion Opportunity. And you can look that one up on Myriad, MYRIAD.live. That'll be from March 29 to 31 in Brisbane. I invite all natural health practitioners to attend either of those two events. And I'd like to warmly welcome you, James, to FX Medicine. How are you?
Thanks so much. Great to be here with you. And it's a rainy day in Venice Beach, California, but I bet it's a sunny day wherever you are.
Well, I wouldn't know because it's only 6:17 here. Thanks very much. I think it's going to be a nice sunny day in Sydney, though. So, now, James, you've been described as the most influential non-physician promoter in the industry. So let's start with this. Why the passion? Because from my perspective, both in America, I mean, that's really on its knees, but even in Australia, Medicare system, it's broken. It doesn't work. It's not, the way that we're aging with our chronic diseases, it just can't keep pace. So tell us about your background and how you came to be in this world of functional medicine.
Absolutely, yeah. So look, the passion developed over time. I think I was the weird kid at school that did natural medicine. Like, I didn't really have any choice in it. I had a chiropractor growing up and a homeopath. I think I might have been the only kid in school who knew what a chiropractor was. I was the only kid whose parents had to be called if they were going to administer antibiotics, because my parents were somehow like up on antibiotic resistance in 1980.
Wow.
And so, that was like the beginning of my world. Just sort of, that was the healthcare that I received. I ended up sort of having a rebellious phase where I thought I needed to be an investment banker, and my degree was in health economics, or economics with a health vantage point. And that's really when I started to see that there was a huge problem that was looming. And America was sort of like this embarrassing case example of a country that was putting more and more money, ever more money into their medical system and getting, not even better results. Actually, the results were starting to drop off. And it was an interesting case study. And about 6 months into being an investment banker, I got a job straight out of university. My only stop between school and university was coming to Australia for the 2003 Rugby World Cup. And I started in 2004. Within basically 6 months, I realized I was sort of playing for the wrong team. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was good at a few different things. I didn't want to just be a numbers guy. And my cousin convinced me to come and work for him in America. So I moved out there. My first job was actually working in a clinic, and it was an amazing starting point to my career, because to this day, it's still the best run clinic that I've ever seen. The spa industry was about 10 years ahead of the integrative medicine industry in working out some of the core processes of running a practice. Everything from how to deal with independent contractors to retail to, systems for answering the phone and rebooking and all that stuff. So I got a great training there. And then I became a sales rep, and I was selling essentially to this practitioner community. I was a supplement sales rep. So I went from trading floor to supplement sales rep on commission, which is not a classic, journey, a professional journey. But I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I just had a feeling that something that I had learned, from my childhood could have an impact on health and this, particularly this cost issue. So, that was the beginning of it. I was a sales rep for a number of years. I started a practice management company because very soon I realized that, physician or clinician entrepreneurship was a bit of a shaky bet. All these doctors and practitioners starting to do integrative medicine, because of a moral obligation that they feel to deliver this type of care, but were typically hamstrung by the fact that in order to do it, they would have to be in private practice. And that came with all of the headaches of actually being in business, marketing, organizing, all the stuff that, that the healers are not predisposed to. And so we started a practice management company. My wife started a company making websites for doctors. And so we started to get really involved in the non-clinical aspects of building a practice. And that sort of all continued on. And then in 2014, we started the Functional Forum. And it was really born out of an idea that, I wanted to bring the community of practitioners together. I had been to a meetup for practitioners in Los Angeles, and I saw how well attended it was, how valuable it was to everyone. And there had never been anything like that in New York. And so we started to put that together. And then, the content was essentially a show. And the reason why we came up with this concept is what I saw. We called it the Functional Forum because, of the functional medicine operating system. It's got a lot of momentum here. But what we really did with the forum was really to take content that had previously been behind a paywall. Like the only way that you could ever learn about functional medicine was to go to a conference, pay the cost, fly out to the hotel, sit in the hotel, and listen to the content live. Maybe you could buy the recordings, but that was it. There was no free video content online.
Wow.
And so that's how the forum really took off, because we got all the best speakers in functional medicine. We got a lot of new young doctors. We tried to feature doctors who were examples of, doctors who had made the switch to integrative and functional medicine. And, that's how it started. And now we've had an episode every month for the last 3 years. And I think we're 37 episodes in right now. And it's been an amazing run.
You know what I think's interesting is whenever I speak to integrative GPs, most of them were not integrative when they started. Most of them were just normal GPs. Like I am a registered nurse. I actually did not believe in any natural medicine, thought it was all hocus pocus. And I was rather vehement about that. I actually had to apologise to a friend whose mother was a naturopath because I used to rib her when I'd come home from holidays from when I was in my registered nursing training. And so I'm a total turncoat. But what I think is interesting about these GPs is they were all dissatisfied in their normal, everyday, standard orthodox practice of medicine. They were dissatisfied with the results that they were seeing with what I'm going to quote unquote standard medicine. They just weren't satisfied with the results that they were giving them X drug, which was in the guidelines, and yet that patient, Mrs. Jones, was coming back and say, you know what, it's not working. I still feel rotten. And so there's this group that are searchers. And what I find is interesting is GPs that have embraced, because of frustrations, they've embraced integrative medicine, they get satisfaction now. And that's one of the big drivers in their lives, is the satisfaction that they get of seeing somebody saying, thank you so much for that different approach. And it's not just throwing out the old, it's saying, well, what can that give me? And what doesn't it do? And then how can I augment that with other things that are safe and sort of fill in the holes of what I call orthodox medicine doesn't do. But you describe that this can have its own inherent problems about profitability going down. Is that right?
Well, look, that's the thing. I mean, what typically happens is this. Someone has this moment of clarity, either through a frustration of their current, of what they're doing, or out of a sudden realization. Let's say either themselves or a family member or a patient, doesn't get well, and now they're forced into going in this direction, and then they see it work, and then they're like, okay, I'm going to have to pay attention to this. Like, this is something I have to pay attention to. And then, and then the next step is, okay, I want to work out how to practice this. And the thing is that this is the era that I've described here as I call functional medicine 1.0, right? Where the only doctors that were doing it or practitioners that were doing it were ones that had found it, that they had this moral obligation to practice it, and then just tried to work it out, right? They would start their practice. They realized they need to spend a little bit more time. They realized maybe they need to have some supplements in the office. And they just trying to work it out. But very quickly, what you see is that if you're going to spend exponentially more time with patients, it's going to be tricky to be able to deliver that kind of care in the same environment as you were delivering your previous type of care. And so that's been one of the problems that we've seen, is that, when you move from a type of medicine that's ultimately driven by the doctor, right, where the doctor is in control, they're the ones who have the bag of tricks, and they're the ones that can, be the hero in the story, that's easy to do more efficiently, because you can come in, you can listen for about 2 minutes until you hear what's wrong, and you can give a drug and you can move on to the next person. Mm-hmm. If you really want to do root cause resolution medicine, if you really want to have the patient be participatory and actually take action to solve their problem, you need a new, different type of system.
Yeah.
And so the era that I think we're moving into right now is what I'm calling functional medicine 2.0, which is where there are enough examples of successful practices that we can see how to run this kind of business and create efficiency in it, so that doctors can run an efficient practice. They don't have to have all the headaches of, making less money or having a system that's not really organized. And technology is arriving just at the same time to be able to facilitate that transformation. And that's what we're interested in. How can we make it exponentially easier for any doctor to switch to a functional medicine practice and be truly successful in building a practice? And there's a combination of different things happening at the same time, a convergence of factors that are making that possible. And that's what we're documenting in my book and in the movement in general.
Fantastic. Now, the book, The Evolution of Medicine, before I ask you about that, I just want to give a shout out to 3 people that they've inspired me, because I think what you're talking about is not just financial success, but a true ethical satisfaction success in building a practice which actually helps people. So I want to give a shout out to these Australian practitioners who have inspired me. Keone Moore, Tammy Guest, Helen Patteran, hi homie. I want to give a shout out to those 3 incredible women who actually do these sort of tutoring of businesses, helping other practitioners to grow their practices ethically and honourably for the health of the patients, and being financial along the way. And so I'm going to ask you about your book, The Evolution of Medicine. What's this all about?
Yeah, look, and I those 3 providers that you're talking about, anyone that's helping the sort of next era of providers make it easy for them to be successful. I mean, that's what functional medicine 2.0 is all about. It's like the first round of people have worked it out. They've taken, they've just gone in, tried things, see what's worked, and getting there. So, in the evolution of medicine, the purpose of the book and the reason why I wrote the book is, we've had 36 episodes. I've done over 100 podcasts. I've interviewed all the top people in functional medicine and people outside of functional medicine who are sort of relevant to the conversation. And I guess what I wanted to do was just to create an asset that I could give to any doctor who's not if I give it to a functional medicine doctor, that they would get a lot of value from it in learning how to build this kind of practice model that we're talking about. But more than that, the real goal of the book was to create an asset that I could give to a regular GP and say, here, read this, and that I would maximize the chance that after reading it, they would want to say, okay, I want to build that kind of practice.
Fantastic.
And so that's the evolution of medicine. It's a hero's journey. So it's a hero's journey for doctors. The first part of it is essentially, getting the moral obligation to practice this type of medicine. And then the second half is really about the final test, which is how do I build a successful practice? And it's been a great hit. I just looked to sort of organize all of the stories that we'd had into something that could convince doctors that they needed to practice this new operating system of medicine, because like exactly what you said, we are in a moment in history where no one really knows how to deal with this epidemic of chronic lifestyle-driven disease. The name, The Evolution of Medicine, is really all about how medicine is adapting to its new environment. And its new environment is non-communicable disease. Medicine was created in an era of communicable disease. That's right. And so all the systems that we have, the fact that we react to a symptom occurs and then the system kicks in is just one example, or the doctor's the center of the process. All of those things came about basically, reacting to infections, where the doctor has the tools and, you need something to happen for you to react to. Now we have this, what we've described here in The Evolution of Medicine is medicine adapting to its new environment. And I believe that the shortest path to a medical system that is capable of dealing with non-communicable disease is the functional medicine micropractice. And essentially in that book, we sort of talk about why that is, why it's necessary, why we need this type of medicine in this era, and then how any doctor can build a successful practice, delivering this type of care in the lowest overhead possible environment, and creating structures that make it available to not just the very rich, but to every American, every Australian, and every person walking the planet.
Mm. And I've got to say, I love this synergy that AIM has picked up on with you. So, you've got the book that the skeptic, let's say the skeptical but interested GP might say, okay, I need to pick up this Evolution of Medicine book. But then they need to be trained in that. And that's one of the things that the Australasian Integrative Medicine Association does, aima.net.au. So get in contact with them if you're a GP who wishes to embark on a new journey of satisfaction in your functional medicine and to learn about functional medicine. There's also ACNEM as well. So you mention in your book that you feel that functional medicine, as opposed to integrative medicine, would be the operating system of the future of medicine. What's the difference from functional as opposed to integrative?
Well, look, the reason why, in my book, I go through this, very piece by piece. In my mind, functional medicine is a way of organizing integrative medicine. Integrative medicine is just talking about the combination of standard of care and non-standard of care intervention. Right. And that's integrative medicine. What is needed and it's not clear to me at this point that two things I have problems with integrative medicine. One is can you reproduce this? Can you teach a doctor to deliver it quickly? What you see in America is that you have lots of integrative medicine gurus and they all do integrative medicine, but they all practice differently.
Yeah.
And so is there a reproducible system to be able to scale up? If you suddenly realize, hey, we need 100,000 doctors who understand integrative medicine, how would you go about training them? Is there a consensus in what they would do in what order? So that's the one problem I have. And then the second thing is, is integrative medicine in its current form capable of actually reducing healthcare costs? Because a lot of times with integrative medicine, we're just adding more modalities in, and that's actually increasing the cost rather than reducing the cost. So for me, functional medicine is a prioritization system for integrative medicine. It is integrative, it's a subsection of integrative medicine where there's a reproducible, systematic operating system for prioritizing the different integrative medicine interventions. So how do you know whether this person in front of you is going to benefit most from a chiropractic adjustment, an elimination diet, or some supplement regime. There's a system that you go through with each patient that is completely reproducible, that every doctor can learn how to do very quickly, and that can say, okay, look, this person, structural integrity is a problem. It seems like, they may be able to get the biggest improvement in function for the least cost by prioritizing chiropractic care. That is what I think is necessary. There's a system that's needed to be able to deliver it. Now, functional medicine has, I think, the best parts of integrative medicine, and that it is integrative. It has the best parts of holistic medicine because it is holistic. It has the best parts of naturopathic medicine because you can see from things like the naturopathic therapeutic order that building function should come before, drugs and surgery and all the more high risk, high cost interventions. So I feel like functional medicine has on it, as a significant strategic advantage, this operating system. And that's why I feel like it will be the thing that allows integrative medicine to make it to the mainstream.
I want to, I don't know whether this is necessarily a disagreement, but I just wanted to add in this little tidbit of information. This was from Deloitte Access Economics in February 2012, in combination with the Complementary Healthcare Council of Australia. The title of the paper was Fish Oils for the Secondary Prevention of Coronary Heart Disease, one of the major killer still in Australia. And I would propose the USA. Cancer's catching up quick, I think. But anyway, and this,
definitely,
but we're talking about heart attack, myocardial infarction, stroke, and all of the attendant risks of cardiovascular disease, and we're talking about fish oils. Now we're talking about fish oil supplements. However, I always add that if you look at the studies, they're in fish eating cultures. The positive studies are always in fish eating cultures. Eat fish and add fish oil supplements in. That's my little bit of advice. But the savings, the healthcare dollar savings were absolutely massive. They alone would be something that could save, to a great degree, the millions that the Australian government spends on the purse of the healthcare costs for just cardiovascular disease. Indeed, Bioceuticals was involved with a trial with the Alfred Hospital, and I think the savings using fish oil. Now, this was for elective cardiac surgery, so we're talking about valves, coronary artery bypass grafts, which are called cabbages, that sort of thing. And the saving was something like $2,300 per patient per stay. Now, you think about how many operating theatres are doing that sort of thing, how many days they're operating per year, and we're talking millions. That's one hospital.
No, I would say, look, we're in complete agreement. There's no disagreement here at all. I know that different integrative modalities delivered at different times can create huge cost savings in particular issues. There's no doubt in my mind of that. What I would say is that how do you know whether to give fish oil? How do you know whether fish oil is going to be a beneficial thing?
Right. Yep.
And you need some sort of system to know, like, is it really good when the heart attack is caused by plaque? Is it when it's caused by inflammation? And so having some sort of deciding factor. But absolutely, I mean, there's plenty of data in naturopathic medicine showing reduced costs of naturopathic interventions from, in certain groups of the population. But sometimes the intervention is like, clinics on how to pick up your bag properly or otherwise, because it was all the back pain stuff.
Yes.
So, more than anything, I just think that, integrative medicine has so many things to offer. What I think is necessary in order to capture the value of that and really
see where you're going,
deliver the potential of it is an operating system that tells you when to do what.
Right. And that's the difference with functional medicine.
And the functional medicine operating system would probably say, hey, if you're this kind of heart risk patient, or if your numbers are this high or that way, definitely take fish oil. And then you convert the value of what you just said and it's delivered. But it may be that, if under different sets of circumstances, that you might be able to get an even more cost saving from, something that like CoQ10 in that same in a different patient population.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I don't disagree at all, and I completely agree that integrative medicine can deliver that. I see functional medicine as a subset of integrative medicine where there's a prioritization system attached to it.
You're twigging in my brain one of my loves and frustrations that I see in natural medicine research, and that is that all natural medicine research should have a cost saving attached to it. Because I've seen stuff like I spoke about the Alfred Hospital, it showed a cost saving, whereas there was another research that was doing great stuff, but using an extremely expensive supplement called SAM-E. And it was just at the doses that were needed, it was cost prohibitive. It was nonsensical to continue the study because nobody could afford it except for millionaires. But I think it's an area that it really sorely needs to be looked at, particularly in light, I will add, in that just 1 or 2 days ago, there was an attack on complementary medicines by, the Friends of Science in Medicine, which I questioned the Friends bit because they seem to dismiss the want to look for any evidence purely because they say that there's always a financial concern. It's, well, who else is going to pay for the damn research? Nobody else is paying for any research into natural medicine, so therefore you've got a fait accompli, haven't you? So this is one of my pet sort of things that, about looking at the healthcare costs. And I just see it as so important. But I've got to ask you, when you're talking about professionals who are starting out, they want to change their practice, they want to do functional medicine, what would you say would be the top two or three things that they've got to do to become successful and satisfied in their practice to shape their business?
Well, look, the first thing is you've got to plan for longevity. One of the things that I see is that, a doctor will go, they'll start sniffing around, they'll go to the local integrative center, and then that'll be in their mind what an integrative or functional medicine center looks like, and then they'll be just trying to build that. And, what I've tried to share with practitioners is that, that typically, you start comparing a clinic maybe that's been open for 10 years to your clinic, and you say, well, there's no way I could build that. Look how much space there is and the overhead and all these people working there. But what they don't see is that 10 years ago when that clinic started, they typically have some sort of version of what I call the micro practice.
Yeah.
And the micro practice is the really low overhead practice where you can basically make mistakes and it not to cost you your whole opportunity. Like if you're going into this and you're going to go into private practice, it's going to take a little bit of capital to get started. Let's make sure we don't waste that all early on. And, while you're still working out how to be an entrepreneur, while you're still working out how to run a private practice, that you don't shoot yourself in the foot to a degree that you have to go back to a job. Because at this moment, there's not that many jobs in functional and integrative medicine. You have to sort of create your own job. So the first thing that I would say is, how much stuff do you really need to build this kind of practice? What I'm seeing now in America is practices where they're literally running it off a laptop, and you don't need that much stuff. You can outsource the supplements. You can have the intake and the EMR stuff can be on a laptop. If you could build a practice off a laptop, where does that mean that you can now practice? I've been asked a lot, do you feel like the centers of health creation in the future are going to be in hospitals? And I'm like, absolutely not. I don't think they're designed for health creation. I think it's more likely that the centers of new health creation will be more like CrossFit and gyms and co-working spaces and community centers and churches. If you look at where health creation is actually happening at scale, it normally has some sort of community side to it. So you look at something like the Daniel Plan and the Saddleback Church in America with Mark Hyman, where they realized that this whole church group was having these Bible study meetings on a Wednesday. They had these small groups of people coming together once a week, and they just infused some health into that community, and there was just dramatic changes in healthcare, and it cost nothing. Like, that's the kind of thing that I think we can look at and say, okay, we need to, provide this. So the thing that I would say to most practitioners is, you got to think a little bit outside the box. And that's what I gave so many examples in my book of, like, where should this clinic be? And what should be the overhead requirements? Can you take advantage of things like telemedicine, where maybe you don't need to have a clinic 5 days a week? You could just start 1 day a week in a physical location, seeing new patients, and then do follow-ups via telemedicine, which is easier for patients, and it means you can work at home a few days a week. And the overhead is approaching zero. Like, do you need someone to be there to book your appointments if there's online scheduling technology?
Right.
Do you even need to have a phone number? Like, some of the most progressive clinics in America have no phone number. You can't call them. You can book an appointment through the online scheduler, but they're like, look, we want to work with people who are tech savvy. There's enough young people who are tech savvy. They can work out how to do the online scheduler. If you have any questions, you can send us an email, but we're not going to employ someone just to answer your, questions that may or may not be, relevant or otherwise. And so these are some of the thinking processes, like, can we completely rethink the minimum viable product for a medical clinic?
Yeah.
And what we'll see is that if you can do that, what you can see is that an MD or a GP who has a job can start to build this type of practice on a Saturday morning without losing any of their income. And now they start to see, okay, well, they've got a few patients, and those patients start getting better. They get a few referrals, and then they're like, now let me see if I can renegotiate my contract with, my current job. And now they're only working 3 days a week in their current job, and now they can do their practice the other 2 days, and they start to titrate to this new practice as it grows. What I see and what I would really not recommend is just going from being an employed physician to being an entrepreneur physician and jumping in with like 2 feet and getting a massive space and thinking you're going to have a big wellness center and having all of these employees or independent contractors, because it's hard enough to learn the new medical operating system.
Yes.
Never mind learning how to do marketing, learning how to deal with independent contractors and employees. These are all lessons that you're going to have to learn. Let's just learn one lesson at a time.
Yeah. I remember my first forays into functional medicine. It was, you want to treat the gut? It was like, you what? So there's big leaps in paradigms that you've got to do if you're an orthodox practitioner, if you're going to be integrate, if you're going to be adopting the functional approach, that's for sure. What you're speaking about just smacks of a lady. Her name's Jessica Donovan. I think she's in Adelaide now. But I think her motivation was because she wanted to travel around Australia with her family, and she wanted to develop a system that she could use to basically keep in touch with her patients. It really smacks of this sort of a freedom to be mobile, a freedom to practice how you want. But I get your point about that migration, that slow migration, particularly if you're an orthodox physician. Does what you're talking about
using your time most efficiently?
Yeah. Does what you're talking about though mainly apply to GPs, to medical doctors, or can you embrace this with naturopathic physicians as well?
Totally. No, absolutely. It's all across the professions. Here's the thing. Okay, let's take one example. If you're a naturopath, if you're a nutritionist, if you're an MD, if you're a GP, whatever, one of the parts of functional medicine or integrative medicine that you have to get your head around is that if you want patients to participate in their care, you're going to have to do patient education, right? So you're going to have to do some sort of patient education, and the better the education that you give, probably the better the patient experience and the better outcome. So now you're sitting there going, okay, well, how am I going to deliver this patient education? Now, up until a few years ago, the dominant way was you book a time and you have your appointment, and you'd have a long appointment because you had to explain all this stuff during the appointment. So you have your hourly rate, and then the patient is basically paying you to deliver information in an appointment that, one, they're only going to remember 5 to 10% of, two, that they're paying for your time to do that. And three, if they didn't really remember, there's no way that they can go back and get that information. So we teach in our practice accelerator and in our trainings, like, hey, there are much better ways to do this that use, email automation or use groups or use health coaches or other providers that can help to deliver this kind of education so that you can spend the time that you spend with patients doing the work that only you can do, and that that everything else is sort of farmed out to a combination of technology and other providers. And so, that's the way that we're thinking about it, is like, how much of this could be automated?
Mm.
And if we can automate more and more of the critical processes of running a practice, then, we can create real efficiency, and we can make it easier and easier for people to build a successful practice. And essentially, this is the thing. Every time there's a successful transition of a GP into integrative medicine, the ripple effect of that successful transition has a massive impact on patients and their health, but also on other doctors who see, wow, this guy's got it made. He works 3 days from home.
Yeah.
He's happy. He loves his interactions with patients. He's getting to the root cause of his diseases, of the disease he's seeing. Like, that is an example that we need many more of. And so what we're trying to do is just to, essentially look out into the industry, see who's doing this best, and cross-report it to everyone else, so that we can speed up adoption of these, efficiencies.
Yeah. I have to ask a devil's advocate question, and
Sure.
I'm not sure about how applicable this is to the American medical system, but in Australia, there's real ethical issues with the first consult being a face-to-face consultation where you examine the patient, you see, speak, engage with the patient, and you do physical examinations as appropriate. I would say that's appropriate for any naturopathic consultation as well. How do you see this fitting into that sort of business model?
Absolutely. As I just said, like some of the most progressive clinics, they have their in-practice, a visit for the first appointment, and maybe other appointments if they need it. But then, then they keep up to date. They do follow-ups via telemedicine and via digital strategy. So, look, a big part of that first appointment is looking at someone face-to-face. There are, cues that you get, from being in person. But also, like last month on the Functional Forum, we had a woman, a psychiatrist, who had started a group telemedicine psychiatry program, where over 8 weeks she educated a group of psychiatric patients who were all low income on, the fundamentals of health creation. There was some peer-to-peer support over the telemedicine platform and group support, and it was very cheap to deliver. The value was off the charts, and there was no physical interaction of anyone in the process. So that's an innovation that she came up with. Now, if we really want to make this available to everyone, you just have to think of it like this, okay? If your fee as a doctor is, say, $200 an hour, and your new patient visit has to be more than an hour or an hour and a half in person, you're automatically throwing up a barrier to entry for people who don't have enough money to throw down $300, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And that's the question, that's the real question of, like, how do we make this available to everyone? And so things like groups, things like provider teams, things like, groups, provider teams, and technology are the three things that are going to allow structures to be created where everyone has access to this type of care. They may not have access to, a full doctor's appointment in the way that it's being done now, but, this is the evolution of medicine. This is medicine adapting to its environment. And one of the parts of the environment that it's adapting to is that the payers are running out of money.
Yeah.
There's not enough money to pay for all of these heart stents.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Forever, and expensive biological drugs for, like, Humira for autoimmune
Crohn's,
disease.
Yeah.
So it's like what you said before about cost. The biggest thing that we have going for us in functional and integrated medicine right now is that our ability to get people off medication, because expensive medication is one of the biggest drivers of healthcare costs. And so if you can take a patient and you can get them off a drug like Humira that costs $50,000 a year, just think about the value that you're adding there. And then just add, then think about type 2 diabetes, and then think about heart disease and whatever, go back to your fish oils. the reason why we're going to take over is because of the value that is offered. And that value-based care equation is the most important equation. And that value-based care equation is the outcome divided by the cost.
Yeah.
And so we need to find ways to generate much better outcomes at much lower cost. And I think that all the things that we've talked about today are right in that zone.
I'll just put a little footnote in there for any healthcare system to any listeners out there, certainly in Australia, definitely around the world. And that is that if you think that that drug, like I'm going to take Humira, because I know the actual cost in Australia, I've looked it up. So for somebody who needs that drug, who has Crohn's disease, it costs around that $30 for 3 vials. That is not the cost to the Australian healthcare system. It costs somewhere between $4,000 to $7,000, depending on the dose and the number of vials that you're getting, how many refills, blah, blah, blah. So if you think that it costs $20, $30 for your blood pressure, heart medication, diabetes medication, there are certain ones that are cheap, but there are many, certainly the newer, certainly as you mentioned before, the immunological type drugs, the biologics, then these are extremely expensive drugs, sometimes in the tens of thousands of dollars to our healthcare system. Now, how do you get taxed on that? That's your tax dollar. So from your wage, you lose that, and part of that goes to pay for those drugs that other person gets for their Crohn's disease. And how, if we could support a system of medicine that saved or reduced the need for those expensive drugs, that's where we save. You save in your tax dollar. It's really interesting how people think, oh, no, my drugs are cheap. They only cost me $2.50. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ultimately, like, I think the adoption of functional medicine will ultimately be like highest where people feel the pain the most of those drugs. So like in America right now, one of the most exciting sort of markets for functional medicine is the self-funded employer, right? An employer who's paying their own health insurance for their patients or for their employees, because the CEO of that company is literally writing the check for the 10 people on Humira every month, and the whole check, not the reduced check. And so, are they willing to spend a little bit of money to get those 10 people in a group and have them work with a functional medicine provider to try and get them off? Hell yeah, they are, because otherwise they're going to be spending $500,000, and there's no plan with Humira that you're only going to take it for a few months and then come off.
No,
the plan is that you're on it for life.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you start turning off the immune system for an extended period of time, it's going to lead to all kinds of other issues that are going to need other drugs.
Yeah.
So that's where you get this cost spiraling. And in every other world, when it comes to technology, Moore's law kicks in and you get reduction in cost, but not in healthcare. It's the opposite direction. And so that's what we're trying to instigate, is what are the structures that can help to reduce costs and improve outcomes. And I think that functional medicine is perfectly placed for that, but we're going to have to get smart about how we deliver it so that it can actually fulfill that potential.
So if you're a GP and you're sick and tired of fulfilling prescription upon prescription for, the next drug is to mask a side effect of the previous drug. I remember a lady once, I used to deliver her scripts to her when I worked in pharmacy, and in Australia you get on the free list once you've had 52 prescriptions. She was on the free list by March. 26 prescriptions. Wow. Yeah, we got her into hospital, and this beautiful physician, Dr. Quinn, I will always remember this man, a physician, got her into hospital, and 4 days later this lady was out on 4 drugs. And, it totally, that's a healthcare cost saving. So for any doctor that is sick and tired of the symptom covering type polypharmacy machine that is happening, I would urge you to attend the James Maskell and the Functional Medicine Micropractice at the Redfern Town Hall, March 25th in Sydney. That's thefutureofmedicine.eventbrite.com.au. Certainly look at the Australasian Integrative Medicine Association, ama.net.au, and you could attend the Reducing Healthcare Costs is the Next $1 Trillion Opportunity, www.ama.net.au. MYRIAD, myriad.live. That's March 29 to 31 in Brisbane. I cannot thank you enough. This is really eye-opening stuff, James. It's no wonder that you're in such demand around the world. I really thank you for joining us and sharing. This is really groundbreaking sort of stuff. So for sharing your ideas with our listeners on FX Medicine today. Thanks so much.
No problem. Yeah, look, the first thing that I ever said on the Functional Forum is we need to start acting like we're winning and not acting like we're losing. Yeah. There's definitely an inferiority complex in this space.
Yes.
And so I would just say to all practitioners, like, this is the future of medicine, and you just happen to have found out about it before anyone else. And because everyone else made fun of it for that long, they're the ones, they could have had the opportunity to learn about it, but dismissed it. Let's take advantage of that by keeping the heart of medicine that, the practitioners that provide it to and deliver it. And there's an opportunity to do that right now with this physician-owned functional micro-practice model where the physicians who get it first have an opportunity to build an asset for themselves, for their community, for their family that can transform the health of their community.
Brilliantly said. This is FX Medicine, and I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. This podcast was brought to you by the Australasian Integrative Medicine Association, AIMA. If you're loving our FX Medicine podcasts, please don't forget to share us with your colleagues, family and friends.